Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Youth Group Reunion Tour podcast. I'm your host, Mikey B.
And I'm your other host, Jared.
Nice to meet you all, and thank you for coming to our flagship episode. Really exciting times. Really great time to be here. It is
what a time to be alive.
2021. The spring has come in Ohio. The birds are out. The snow has melted.
We had a snowfall not a mere days ago.
Yes.
Several inches.
So
that's how you know it's spring in Ohio.
We picked the perfect day to do it because it's perfect weather outside. And so we chose the most indoor thing possible. Doing a podcast.
Yeah. So to give you guys an idea of what this podcast is going to be, so Mike and I grew up in church together and went to youth group together for many years. And we were talking the other day about, there's a lot of weird like youth group subculture things that, maybe don't get talked about quite so much, like bands and movies, TV shows, things like that. And there's like the obvious ones like Veggie Tales, and then there's some more deep cuts. And we thought, it'd be really interesting to talk about that. And the other thing is, like, we thought it'd be cool to maybe get in contact with some people that we went to youth group with, hence, the reunion tour aspect of it. And so a little bit down the line, we might be getting some guests of, like, our friends that we haven't spoken to in a little bit, or, that we went to youth group with.
Yeah, I think that there's really nothing out there yet for this whole Christian subculture thing.
Yeah, nothing really that I know of, anyway. I mean, it's possible that there's other people doing it, it's just I haven't heard of them, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was such an important time in my life, right? It was such a time that, like, it's so intertwined with nostalgia of the era for me.
Yeah.
And there's so much stuff that you may have forgotten about, but it was really, really real. It's kind of hard to describe how real it was.
It's still real to me.
It's still real to me, dang it. No, this is still a Christian podcast.
I mean, I would say most of my friends now are like friends from youth group. I mean, with a few exceptions, but like that's just like it was a really important time for me because it still is, because that's where I met a lot of my friends and was really influential to me.
Yeah, and part of that influence is like it just seems like there's this area that so many people experienced and no one has really talked about it. So it almost is like
it's like a fever dream.
Yeah, it feels like a fever dream. When you hear about some of the stuff that we're hoping to talk about here in a little bit, I mean, it really is borderline feverish dream.
Yeah.
When you're talking like Mr. T and Gary Busey teaming up to save the Antichrists.
Yeah. And that's like the second string apocalypse,
right.
movie. That's not even, Left Behind. It's the one that's after it. And somehow Mr. T's managed to be in it.
Right. There's just so much here, guys. We just really want to talk about it. And what's really important to us is that, we learn a little bit more about ourselves. We learn a little bit of history of going back in time and figuring out what it was like as a middle schooler and why it was like that. And I'm just trying to process this. So this is almost therapeutic for me in a way. I hope to not get too deep, I suppose. Yeah. We'll see how this goes.
So for anyone that's wondering, we're going to be focusing mainly on like late 90s to like through the 2000s. That's when we were around. Not that, I'm still somewhat involved with volunteering with youth groups, so I know a little bit about like what's going on today, but the things we're mainly going to be, reminiscing about are going to be that sweet spot of the mid 2000s probably, and a little bit before, a little bit after.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I didn't quite think of that in terms of an introduction, but I think it's important to sort of give you a profile of who we are. We're two guys in their 30s.
Yeah.
And we grew up in Ohio and went to Christian colleges.
The same college,
yep. For a lot of people, that was kind of flyover country, and we're really trying to explore whether our experience was unique as far as, we and some others are the only people who know this stuff, or maybe there is an audience out there of all these people who we never met that had these same experiences, like I said, like a fever dream. It's like, do you really remember that happened? Like, they were with that and they did this, and that's kind of...
Especially because, So we went to the same youth group. We went to the same college. We're going to have some other people on, hopefully later on. Then they're going to be like from our youth group. So it's going to be kind of a small sampling. So we want to hear from, anyone out there that might be listening. We'll plug our socials later, but hit us up on Instagram, hit us up on Twitter, send us an email, tell us you're insane. There's no way that happened. Never heard of it. Or, yeah, I definitely remember that. It was a big part of my life, or, anywhere in between.
For sure. For me, to kind of give you an elevator pitch here, is basically two guys who went to youth group, who did the youth group thing very deeply, and are nostalgic about that time period from probably the late 90s to the mid to late 2000s. Depends what we talk about, but that's kind of the main era that we're focusing on.
Yeah, I would say we hang out pretty often, not so much the past year for obvious reasons, but before that, the years before that, and pretty much every time we'd get together, we'd be like, hey, do you remember when this happened in youth group? Or do you remember this person that did this, or whatever it is? So we're hoping to tell some of those stories and, hear some of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think there's no better way to start off a podcast like this than talking about the quintessential youth group band. And if you're a good fit for this podcast, you already have that band who I'm thinking of in mind, right?
Yeah, if you should be able to guess them within, I'll say 3 guesses, but for sure within 5. There's no way, if it's beyond that, you had a different experience than us, and I guess we'd like to hear about that too then.
Yeah, and so our first musical exploration episode has to do with a band that is
Hometown Heroes.
From our home state. They are from Canton, Ohio. They are a band who really was one of the first crossover bands that I can remember my friends actually liking.
Yeah, I remember I went to school and saw someone who I knew didn't go to youth group or anything, and they had a shirt for this band on, and I was like, whoa, what? I was like, where did you get that shirt? And they tried to tell me about oh, it's this new band, and I was like, no, I've known about this for a while, but glad you guys have finally caught on.
Yeah. In case you haven't figured it out right now, that narrows it down, I think, a lot, and it definitely wasn't the Newsboys or Audio Adrenaline, so there go your first 2 guesses. The band we're talking about, of course, is a very fitting band, Relient K. Relient K was a band that many of us have a lot of fond memories with. Some of us may have had our first feelings for a girl to a Relient K song.
Do you want to tell us any more about that, Mike?
Yeah, maybe later.
Later, okay.
Yeah, it was a band that was very youth group oriented because they knew their target audience. There are a lot of crossover bands like maybe Jars of Clay and, like I mentioned, Newsboys, but it really felt like for the time, Relient K was totally posed to target the people from ages 10 to 18. And they had it down pat and no parent could understand it, right? They had their own style, their own sound, their own weird quirkiness.
I would say at least to 22 because they did have a song called College Kids. So we got to remember that.
Oh, yes, that's true. Yeah, that's
a classic song.
Absolutely. I'm just talking about it from my lens, right? Their music was totally to me, the epitome of a youth group band.
Yeah.
One, because the hip pastors at the time, they were the ones sort of having to come up on that. It's oh yeah, we know who DC Talk is. We're comfortable with them. But then it's Relient K, wait, they're a pop punk band? Hold on.
They were cool with the grunge band of DC Talk, but then the pop punk emo started to take over. They just had to readjust for that.
No, for real. But I really think they're so quintessential, right? Because their music, if you're not familiar with their music, basically how I describe their music to someone who has never listened to Relient K at all would be a cross between Blink-182 and maybe I don't know, Ben Folds.
Hawthorne Heights.
Hawthorne Heights. No, I don't know. I'm trying to think of bands with piano, The Fray.
Yeah.
Maybe Blink-182 and The Fray is how I describe their music. But what made them so interesting as a youth grouper was they had a ton of energy, right? Their songs were super fast, 180 BPM, drums, bass, guitar.
They had a lot of songs too that were they had some that had Christian tones to them, and then they had some that were just complete. They had a song about Lion-O, about the Thundercats, just Had nothing to do with church at all.
It's kind of funny that you reference that
Yeah.
because, as a nerdy youth group kid, I really had no concept of Lion-O. It was maybe nostalgic for the people of Relient K, I suppose.
Because they grew up in the 80s when
Sure.
that would have been,
And they had lots of 80s influence, kind of looking through some of
Pink
their
Tux
song
to the
titles.
Prom.
Pink Tux to the
We'll
Prom.
discuss that more later.
Yep. All of those types of things I feel like were their nostalgia.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it at all.
Yeah, and it kind of passed on to me, and I was like, yeah, I remember Thundercats, and I was like, I wasn't born until 5 years after that show went off the air or whatever.
Right. No, another reason why I think they're so important as a youth group band is because they were like geeky like that, right? And when I think of youth group, I guess to me, the emotion that I get is this like coming of age thing that's like not quite like the movies, right? It's a coming of age, but it's awkward and it's weird and it's uncomfortable and it's like you just talk about what you like and it doesn't matter if it fits in with like your album, right? You just sing about it.
Yeah.
And that was Relient K.
We're going to name our band after my crappy car, but I'm going to purposely spell it wrong.
Right.
For copyright reasons, just in case.
Right. Like it never felt they were trying to be cooler than they were, right? And that's part of the appeal.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the title of the band. Like I just mentioned it was named after Matt Thiesen's car, but they spelled it wrong for, legal reasons, which turned out they didn't need. But, all the other bands we've mentioned, maybe like the Newsboys, right? They're talking about the good news. Jars of Clay, that's, a verse from the Bible. Okay, so a lot of them had, names like that were very clearly trying to make it, evident that they were a Christian band, and then there's this band named after a car.
Yeah, that was pretty edgy, I suppose. As far as youth group names go. But I think that's why they had crossover appeal. It wasn't like, oh, these guys are called, the Jesus Freaks or whatever. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is like a normal band name.
Yeah.
I suppose, for the era.
Normal enough.
Normal enough, of course, sure. So I wanted to talk about maybe the first song that you remember from Relient K. That where were you and what was the song?
Okay.
When you first heard of them?
All right, I do remember this. It was at youth group. I think I was in 7th grade, so it would have been my first year in youth group. You would have been there a year ahead of me already. I have to pull up Spotify to remember the exact name of it because it's super long. It was called Chapstick, Chap Licks, and Things Like Chemistry. That's the first song I remember. I remember we played it like in the warm-up before like youth group would start happening. Before we did worship, it was when people were just hanging out. I remember that song.
So you were how old? You were a freshman?
No, I would have been in 7th grade at that time. Because I was at our church. I got gypped because it used to be that you couldn't go into youth group until you were in 7th grade. But when I went into 7th grade, they let 6th graders come up with us, and so I missed out an entire year.
Boo.
But that's what so that was my first year, and that's when I first would have heard it. Because my mom was all about country music because that was like I guess the least objectionable like popular music. So we listened. So I know a lot about late 90s and early 2000s country music. And then I was able to pick my own songs, and I picked Relient K and some other bands we'll speak about later.
Like I want to touch on that for a little bit. You talking like Garth Brooks or like
Garth
me your
Brooks.
rotation.
Okay. Definitely Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, some of like what classic countries like Alabama and Charlie Daniels Band.
Nice.
And then obviously Reba McEntire, Shania Twain.
Classics.
Man, I Feel Like a Woman.
It's a great album.
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't listened to it in a while.
Used to sing that song, which was maybe weird as a little boy, but
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones that I recall. Definitely Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn. Trying to think of some more that would have been
quite the musical backdrop, though.
Toby Keith, right? Yeah.
To jump from country to Relient K is quite the jump.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of, at least for me, like up until middle school, I kind of just was like, I have to listen to whatever my mom's listening to, and now I do. The first CD I ever had was Aaron Carter's debut single, Aaron's Party.
What a hero.
Yeah. It's him in a jean jacket with an American flag behind him.
He's
So that was the first CD I remember having, and I remember that That was the first thing we would, and I only listened to That's How I Beat Shaq, Aaron's Party, and I Want Candy, and I couldn't tell you another song from that album. Also, none of the other songs on that album matter.
Yeah. So my experience was a little bit different. My first experience with the Relient K was, me being the true hipster and being 1 year older than you.
Yeah.
Real cool. I was into them.
Spelling bee champ.
I was into them at album number 2.
Okay.
Which was The Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek.
Yeah.
And the first song I heard by them was actually Pressing On.
Okay.
And I think it was on at youth group. I wasn't in the older youth group, but the older kids in the youth group were playing that song, and I was like, wow, this song has a ton of energy.
This song rules.
Yeah, this song is
we went back and listened to some of these songs in preparation just to get a refresher, and our general consensus was, yeah, this is still cool.
Yeah. No, it was so different, right? Because I was I wasn't the type of music I was listening to at the time. To give you some background on my musical background.
I know I can name one band. MXPX, right?
Yes. MXPX, actually for me, I liked MXPX after Relient K.
Afterwards, okay.
Relient K,
I just remember you always having possibly multiple MXPX shirts.
I definitely did.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but my first concert ever was MXPX and Relient K and Rufio.
Don't know Rufio, but the rest of it sounds rad.
Yeah, it was rad. Since I'm already talking about it, I'll just mention that first concert now, and then I'll get back into my first impression here. My first concert, it was probably around the time of Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek. So that would have been probably 2002, 2003, around that time.
That sounds right.
And I went with my friend and my friend's dad.
Name drop him.
Anthony.
Okay, yeah.
It was a big deal. And I remember saying dude, it's going to be a punk rock show. I'm going to be in the front row and I'm going to mosh, dude.
Yeah.
It's
getting elbows to the face.
Yeah. It's like that weird middle school that's oh yeah, moshing is just jumping around and having fun. It sounds awesome. And I remember I went to the front of the stage and all of a sudden I realized that my 75 to 90 pound frame was not built for the hardcore punk crowd who is going to blow me in the back basically with their elbows.
Side note, put down on our list of potential episode topics that our church used to host punk rock shows, and we definitely had mosh pits in the youth group room.
We definitely did.
Mark that down. That's a future episode. You're going to want to hear that story.
Definitely, Mark. But I guess my takeaway from that was wow, this is way actually edgier than I thought. I thought it was just going to be, my only experience with concerts were I don't know, church concerts, right?
Choir concerts.
No, seriously, a singer comes and they sing and there's no band.
Yeah.
And everyone sits in their pews and they stand up and clap.
Golf clap afterwards.
Golf clap when you're done. And here I was at Relient K, MXPX, and Rufio, and it was not a Christian crowd. There are people drinking, there are people, smoking outside. There's the actual hardcore punks who like this kind of music. And I really loved it. I had a good time, but I definitely remember getting bruised and smashed, and security had to pull me out, and I just had to finish the rest of the show from the back.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that tall, so I couldn't see that well, but it just was totally different than what I thought. Cause I don't know, you just watch a music video, right? And people are jumping around, and you're oh, this sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And then you're a little kid and you're getting crushed by a bruiser.
I never had the opportunity to go to a Relient K show, but I did go to several other Christian shows. Some of them we went to together. Mm-hmm. The first concert I ever went to was Winter Jam with Toby Mac.
Yes.
I remember he played the slam, and every time he would say it, he had these lights that would go off strobe lights. He picked one up and he held it out to the crowd. And he blinded me with it.
That's so Toby Mac.
Yeah.
Actually, that was one of I have to talk about my DC Talk show as another time. I'm right now.
Just do it.
All right. So that
listen, I gotta make a disclaimer right now for anyone that's. We are gonna retell stories, especially me. I'm gonna tell stories multiple times, so you just gotta get on board.
All right. So that was my first punk show that was felt like it was edgy, I suppose. I saw
Relient Toby Mac.
It was DC Talk.
Okay, yeah.
and they were at the Wolstein Center in downtown Cleveland.
And this was before they broke up?
This was actually their solo tour.
Okay.
So imagine.
So it was all three of them together, but performing as solo acts.
And then performing together.
Oh, okay.
So it was like.
Also, that sounds rad.
Yeah, it sounds like they made a lot of money that way.
They each got paid twice.
Exactly. They each got paid twice. So, I mean, in hindsight, it's a pretty good, sweet gig,
Savvy business.
It's like you put on a different hat and you're like a different character, It's kind of weird. But yeah, so it was DC Talk, and I was with my dad, and, I got to sing with Toby Mac a little bit when he came out in the crowd and put the microphone in people's faces.
Do you remember the song?
It was In the Light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember which line you got to sing?
I don't remember the line, but it was the
give
one.
Give us a live reenactment right now. Just pretend.
It's like it's this song. If you haven't heard this song, In the Light was, I can't remember if it was a Toby song or if it was a DC Talk song, but it like ends with, there's like this bridge in the middle where like in classic church fashion where like it's just the chorus and the music is all dropped out, right?
Yeah.
So like it gets real big and then it drops out, and then Hillsong copied that for like every single song ever after that because it was cool. But it was like, I want to be in the light as you are in the light. I want to shine like the stars in the heavens. It was like that kind of thing. It was
Toby Mac. You're on notice.
Yeah, I mean,
Mike's coming for you.
Listen, I'll be the hologram Toby Mac.
Yeah, if you ever can't fulfill your duties as Toby Mac, we got a replacement.
Yeah. Anyways, so that was my first concert. Getting back to Relient K and the first song, I remember it was definitely Pressing On, and my musical experience before that.
I'll argue that your first song was better than my first song.
Maybe, Chaplic's
cooler. I don't know.
Yeah, Chemistry. It was like
the first song I heard, it was good, but I just think Pressing On is better.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And so I guess my musical background was, my tastes were pretty terrible. I remember I went to Walmart.
You're trying to say they're better than Aaron Carter and Garth Brooks?
Well, Backstreet. So the first album I ever owned was Backstreet Boys' Millennium.
Yeah.
And
Backstreet's back,
I
baby.
listened to the crap out of that, right? And my dad, I felt like, was always embarrassed when I like know those songs, because my dad was like a rocker, right? He was like a Queen, like
just for reference,
David Bowie.
Mike's dad is potentially the most intimidating man I've ever met in person if you don't speak to him, because he's very tall and very dark and swarthy, but he's also incredibly kind and thoughtful and very nice. But just looking at him, you would be intimidated. How tall is your dad?
6'2", 6'3", maybe. Yeah.
Big man.
Let's just say this as a teaser for a future episode. He'd be the type of guy that you'd be afraid to bring a girl home to. I'll just leave it there. It's like a How I Met Your Mother thing, right? It's a true story.
It's how your girlfriend met your dad.
Yes, very true. And my future wife met my dad, actually. And so, basically my dad loved rock music and loved guitars. And at the time, my best friend, Drew, convinced me
also potential future guest,
convinced me I was too old to learn how to play guitar.
This is a classic Drew move to weasel in somewhere and try to convince you to do something that's bad.
Yeah. I just wanted to learn how to play guitar because I thought it was cool. Yeah. And around this same age of youth group and kind of coming into it, I bought my first guitar when I was in 8th grade, despite my best friend telling me that by the time I was in 8th grade, people had 4 to 5 years of guitar lessons already under their belt, and I was probably too old to learn it.
I would argue not true.
I would argue that's probably the worst advice career-wise I've gotten from anyone, because it was like a very fulfilling hobby that I...
Several great bands and concerts in high school I got to go to, including such acts as Break Out the Shotguns, Ninth and Ash, and I don't remember the other one.
Never Say Forever.
That one,
Many things came out of that. Anyways, so my music taste was terrible, but my dad was always a rocker, right? And I remember I went to Walmart with him, and I picked up a Baha Men CD, and I was like, Dad, I really want this. And knowing my dad, Jim, said, he just looked at me with such disdain. They're like, son, we don't want this, and we're gonna talk about how you spend your money from now on. I didn't have a job. I was in middle school. I heard Who Let the Dogs Out at a baseball game. It was cool. You know, I thought it was... That's a true story. That's not a joke.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, I thought Aaron Carter was going to be the pinnacle, but I think Baha Men beats it.
Baha Men is like, at least people remember Aaron Carter for being Nick Carter's younger brother.
Yep.
And like his song was How I Beat Shaq and things like that. I Want Candy is like,
he was a big deal on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, at least people like somewhat remember them. Like the Baha Men is the epitome of like a one-hit wonder back when you can get away with making albums full of garbage.
With like 40 people in the band.
Yeah, right. Like no one knows who any of the Baha Men are. If you saw them on the street, you know, getting a 7-Eleven next to you, you'd be like, oh, that definitely was Aaron Carter. But you wouldn't know that.
Unless maybe, you know, like some dogs ran by and he said, like, who let the dogs out? Then I'd be like,
yeah,
that's him.
Who. Yeah. Anyways, you know, that was kind of how I got into them. So it was definitely like part of that, like, you know, culture of, you don't know what music is out there. You're kind of getting too old to like listen to the radio a little bit. But you're trying to find something that's like yours and not your parents, you know. So Relient K was that band for me. Mm-hmm. You know, they were the first band that like I was like, I got to show other people this. Mm-hmm. And you know, they were people that I showed my friends at school, and they're like, wow, this is cool. And I don't know if I ever told them directly it was a Christian band. It was like my weird, awkward, subtle way of witnessing, like, here, listen to this band. You might become a Christian if you listen to this band.
When I was in 8th grade, we had to do like a public speaking thing, and it would have to be like a persuasive speech, I think. And my speech was going to be on like that, like Christian music is as good as like pop music or whatever. And I remember we will almost certainly speak about this band later, but the video that I showed to prove this in class was Rock Fist by 1,000 Foot Crutch. And so I give this, and some people were really, and like, listen, obviously the choice should have been probably like, I should have used like Switchfoot or whatever, because they were popular at the time. But I hate Switchfoot, and you'll tell that story later as a teaser. There's a reason why I hate Switchfoot. Meant to Live should have been the one, because everyone in my class was like, oh, I've heard of that before. Instead I was like, look at Rock Fist, check this out. And then the only thing I remember is a bunch of people kept asking me if Jesus Walks by Kanye West was a Christian song, and I had to say, no, it's not.
Yeah. I don't know. You could maybe make a case for it now.
You could, yes, you could now. At the time, I was like, does he cuss in it? Then no.
Yeah, I actually felt the same way.
Yeah.
So getting back to Relient K, you know, so we had this album, and it was like an album that I don't know if anyone else's youth group was like this, but our youth pastor would always like, people would come early to youth group, and what you do is you would like hang out, and we'd have random games you could play, or
I would always come to youth group at least, at very minimum, 15 minutes, usually a half hour before, especially when I could drive, because it was just all of your friends hanging out, and you were either playing video games or listening to music, or, you know, trying to talk to girls unsuccessfully, or, you know, whatever it was that you were. And sometimes if you went early, you get asked by the youth pastor, like, hey, I'm going to do this game, I need your help, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was the album. I just remember if, like, you know, that Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek came out, and it was played for like a whole year, and like I listened to it almost once a week, because it would be like an hour-long CD, and they'd start playing it whenever the pastors got there, and I'd always, you know, be there, and sometimes they put it on shuffle or whatever, but I just remember hearing those songs for a year, and then their next album came out, Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek, or Two Lefts, right?
Yeah.
And then, and so it was like that for like my entire youth group experience from like 2002 to 2006 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, oh yeah, I heard these Relient K albums like probably at least
and then
once a week.
later in our youth group career, Christian rap started getting cool, and then that's what would be played.
Yeah.
Like we'd get like Lecrae or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the time, Relient K was the big thing. I remember this is when I was in 7th grade, and it was like very early on in my youth group career. I won some sort of a game. I don't remember what it was, but I won a CD. And the CD was like the remastered version of Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but Three Do. It's the one with the blue cover and all the cars on it or whatever. and I was like, this is the coolest CD ever. And I like made my mom play it on the way home, and that's when I like really got into Relient K, was really exposed to them, because now I had the CD and I could listen to it when I wasn't at church. And so there was only I would say maybe a few songs that we would like generally play at, like that would be chosen to be played at church. And then so I got to listen to some of the other, like they wouldn't necessarily play like Pink Tux to the Prom. Not that there was anything like inappropriate about it. It's just like
they just had random songs.
Yeah. So, and I loved that one. I thought that one was great. That was probably one of my favorite ones from that album.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about Relient K trivia, maybe some things you didn't know.
Yeah.
Because kind of in preparation
We
of this,
talked about the band name.
We talked about the band name.
To trivia.
That's pretty well known trivia, but definitely related.
Yeah.
But, just kind of stepping out of this and
Yeah.
maybe 10 to 15 years since I thought about them, there's a couple interesting things that I found out about them as far as, their history and things like that. I'm most familiar with, their first 4 albums.
Yeah, so from the self-titled album up through, that's the ones that we're most familiar with. Yeah. I know there are many other ones past that. I remember like I had like a bird on it or something, and I don't remember the name of it.
They actually have 6 other albums, which is like surprising to me, because a lot of these bands sort of faded into obscurity and really didn't do much after the, I think of a lot of bands that sort of had 1 or 2 solid albums, like bands like The Wedding, and
Rest in Power.
Yes, we'll talk about them.
Love The Wedding.
But they just like went away, but for some reason, I guess they continued doing it, which is really cool.
I have to imagine it's got to be Matt Thiessen and Matt Hoops, and then just a rotating group of people. That's what I imagine the group is, or at least it's got to be Matt Thiessen, right?
Yeah, Matt Thiessen's definitely in them. I think Matt Hoops quit the band somewhere.
But he was in it for a while beyond the CDs we're most familiar with, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was a part of all of those.
Okay. All right, so hit me with some of this trivia.
So some of this trivia, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Katy Perry connection with all this, because that's a lot of things people don't know.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, it was rumored and then confirmed that Matt Thiessen and Katy Perry used to date.
Amazing.
Back before she was Katy Perry.
Before she kissed a girl and liked it.
True. Technically. Back when she was Katie Hickson and, kind of emo goth.
This is an important time to remind everyone that Katie Hickson performed at our alma mater, Grove City College, just before she turned into Katy Perry. I found this out when we went there and couldn't believe it. And I don't know. I always just thought it was really interesting that Katy Perry, before she was famous, performed at our college.
I'm sorry, I got her name wrong. It's Katie Hudson. I'm sorry, but close enough.
Please direct all hate mail towards our socials, which we'll give later.
Yeah, crazy.
All corrections.
No, but she had a song. It was called Long Shot, and the music video is, you can still find a terrible VHS rip on YouTube. But Matt Thiessen's
we're gonna try and get at the very least we will get a link, and we're gonna try and get a rip of it to put on our Instagram for anyone to check out if they want to.
Yeah. So they dated, and they were in the music video. Matt Thiessen is like playing guitar, and Katy Perry's singing. It's not a great song. She definitely got better writers later on. She's trying to do this, like, I don't know, weird Evanescence type of thing, I suppose.
Wake Me Up?
Not quite like that, but like it reminds me of the same type of vibes, I guess, of like the vocals. But yeah, it's crazy to think that like, they had 2 separate careers like that.
In another life, Matt Thiessen could be Orlando Bloom.
True. Or Russell Brand, depending on how,
Wait, isn't she married to Orlando Bloom right now?
Yes, but I was saying it could have ended poorly, and then they split.
Makes sense.
Another piece of trivia about Relient K that you may not know is, one of the ways that they got popular was having their songs in a Power Ranger episode.
We for sure went and found this.
Yep.
And first, I believe we found a replay of it that the license had expired and the song was not in it, and we thought it wasn't true. We went and we were able to find a newer, like a closer when the license was still in, and we have found it and have seen it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, Power Rangers Ninja Storm is what it's called.
Do you have the episode in season?
Sure. Season 11, episode 4, in the scene where Tori meets Blake.
And we have potentially a link for this also, and also potentially a link or a video on Instagram too.
Definitely. So I just find it interesting, right, that like, they were one of these first bands that like kind of blew up, and when they blew up, I mean, they were everywhere, right? They were in Power Rangers, they were on Youth Group, they were on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, right?
Which insane.
Yeah.
So this is what I remember in high school, right? So this came out, right? But it didn't get big right when it came out, because I think it came out in 2004. And I don't remember being a big deal until I was in high school, which would have been in 2005. And when it did, this, that song, whatever, it was Be My Escape, came out. And I saw, like, girls in my high school that had Relient K t-shirts on that, like, didn't go to my youth group, weren't involved in another youth group as far as I knew. And so I was like, hey, where, how do you know about that band? And they're like, oh, they're this new band. I saw them on the Tonight Show. And I was like, I've known about this band for years. That was, the first time I got to be like, I know about this band. I'm a hipster, okay?
That's right.
And
one of the first times that a youth group kid can feel cooler than everybody else,
Yeah. Knew all about them.
Yeah.
Was able to recommend. It was like, if you like this song, you may also like High of 75, which is the exact same chord progression, but acoustic instead of electric.
Yes.
which is true.
Yes.
Which is true.
As a musician and a guitarist, I didn't realize it until I listened to him back to back and realized it was
right now. Seriously, go to the album on Spotify. Listen to the first 5 seconds of Be My Escape, and then listen to the first 5 seconds of High of 75. They're exactly the same.
Yep.
Also, bold move of them to put those tracks back to back.
Yeah.
Like, not even like to try and trick you and like put it somewhere like a couple tracks down. They're like, listen, we know this chord progression rules.
Everyone loves it.
We can get some extra mileage out of this. We'll do an acoustic song and an electric song.
Yeah. So here's a little last piece of trivia here before we get into something else. What album do you think was their most popular album out of all of their albums in terms of sales?
Okay, it seems like this is a trick because it has to be but I know you wouldn't be necessarily asking this if that was true.
No, I would be.
Okay,
it is.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. How many copies do you think sold?
Let's.
Remember, it's $1 million to get platinum.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. That's what I wanted to know. How many to get platinum? I'm going to guess double platinum. I'm going to guess 2 million.
Okay. Final answer is it was not platinum. It was certified gold.
Okay.
It was around 800,000.
Okay, so I Price is Right rules. I totally blew it.
Yeah, it's what? It's okay though because it seemed larger than life, and that's all that matters. Right?
It's probably just because in my little world, it was insane that they were on the Tonight Show and doing other things. So I was like, it must be double platinum.
Well, they had 2 songs in MTV's Top 10.
Yeah.
Right? They were on
I
Total Request Live.
I remember the music video for Be My Escape.
Yeah.
It was like they were like in a house or whatever and the walls were falling down, right? Mm-hmm. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, that album really was the one. And I definitely agree. I think it was their most polished.
Yeah.
They kind of, did some more being them. I think, did that album have a hidden track on it? That was one thing Relient K always did.
I know that the previous album, Jefferson Airplane, if you it was like 11 minutes long, but the song was only like 4, and if you listened
to the very
through
end,
and there was like a little song at the end.
Yeah.
I'll say it did. I don't know.
I'm not sure, and I have to confirm that, but I remember after that, I don't think they had a hidden track. This is crazy, but we used to have to listen to CDs, and when you would pre-roll them, like you could actually fast forward beyond the start of the first track.
Oh yeah.
And so there'd be like this 30 seconds of silence in there. So yeah, that's how you would do it. So yeah, crazy times. They definitely, I wouldn't say they pioneered the art of the hidden track, right? I guess you can say.
Yeah, I know our The Wedding, the band that we like, had a bunch of hidden tracks on their songs too.
Definitely.
I'm sure there were many before and many after.
Yeah, but it's part of what made them fun and so youth group accessible, right? It was like they weren't taking themselves as seriously as maybe some other bands, that were trying to be cool and trendy.
Yeah, so we took the time to stop for a minute and listen to this hidden track, and it is as weird as I remember it. Some things that stood out to me is there's something about Paschetti. I know that was for sure and what else is there's like some weird, they each took a turn rapping like a verse or something, and there's the beginning of it, they yell something.
Pepperoni.
Pepperoni!
Yeah. It was like the epitome of like now it'd be laughed at as like cringe and random or whatever the kids say. Yeah. But back then it was like, haha, this is pretty weird and funny. No one else is doing this.
Yeah.
This is
no
awesome.
one else found this track.
Right.
It was just me.
Yeah. It's like, wow,
I found it on accident because I was like listening to something and I like I think I was like listening to it on repeat and fell asleep in my CD player. And it kept playing it, and then it like woke me up because it was someone yelling pepperoni, and then I was like, what is this? And I looked and I was like, this is still the same track, because they don't, at least on the album, they didn't like list like, hey, this track is actually 11 minutes long. It was like, no, it's just 4.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing is that I don't know that you could actually listen to some of those things that were in the beginning, like the preview of the track, like I talked about. Did have that, and it was the last album to have that, so I did confirm that. Yeah. If you would rewind it, if you would have a CD player and rewind it 30 seconds, you would hear like a mini song in that 30 seconds of like intro. Now you can only get that on the CD, and hardly anyone has CDs anymore, right? If you're listening it to Spotify or something like that, you won't find it there. But I just found it interesting. Kind of it matched the decline, I suppose, in my mind, of Relient K when they got rid of the hidden track.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I kind of think happened is like, when they got some mainstream success with then it kind of seemed like the next album and some of the albums going forward from that, they were trying to like kind of straddle both sides of like both worlds that they were in, right? And so they kind of ended up with like the worst parts of both, right? Where they weren't necessarily popular mainstream, but they lost some of their fan base that was like, in the contemporary Christian, sphere of influence or whatever. And at least for me, I was never that into them beyond that. I mean, I listened to their next album. I was excited when it came out. There were a few songs that I thought was like, this is fine, but I was like, this isn't as cool as I remember it. And
part of that is getting older too. Yeah. But, Relient K was a band also that was not without their controversies. There were at least 2 controversies I can think of that had to do with Relient K. One when they were in their peak, and then the other sort of afterwards. The one I'm thinking of is the famous Abercrombie incident, which is actually not that famous, and I actually didn't know about that until I did a little background research. But apparently Relient K was used, or they had a contract about to be signed with Abercrombie and Fitch to like have some sort of, maybe it was going to be in a commercial, which like after watching some like vintage Abercrombie commercials, like how would Relient K fit into that?
We did go and watch a vintage Abercrombie commercial because there was a local celebrity at our friend's college, at Wheaton College, Wheaton University now, and his name was Jeff Burns. And he was a student at Wheaton, and on the weekends he would model for Abercrombie and Fitch. And by model, I mean he would literally go to a store and stand outside of it shirtless and try and usher people into it.
Well, actually,
and then he eventually got picked up to be like a national model. That's how he got his start. Was in Chicago. He would do that. Then he got picked up to be a national model. He was like the abs on the bag.
Yeah.
And then he was in this commercial where I think you can see his butt crack for like half of a second or something. And then he was it kicked out of Wheaton or something?
I think he had I'll have to follow up on the full story, but the story I heard is that he got kicked out, like he had to take a semester off or something, and I don't know if he transferred
against the
or
Wheaton Code of Conduct.
Yeah, it was one of those deals where it really got people spun out of shape. And actually, that was another controversy of the time that it was a big deal to have an Abercrombie bag. I mean, you were a bad girl that my parents didn't want me to associate with if you had Abercrombie or Hollister.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that, you only hear rumors about, and the rumors are inevitably way worse than actuality.
Yeah.
It's like Hot Topic, where I had someone in a youth group.
Spencer's.
Yeah, I literally, I remember someone from the youth group, and I'll share with you who that is later.
Yeah.
Literally say like Hot Topic has like satanic Bibles, and
I believed it.
I mean, I believed it too. It was the scariest store in the mall.
I saw the people that shopped at Hot Topic in my school.
Sure,
I believed it.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that like as a kid you're like, oh, you hear Abercrombie, wow, that's so bad, and now like as an adult it's like, I don't like Abercrombie or anything, but it's like I'm not afraid to like get a polo shirt if I have to. That I'm like,
quick, Mike, real quick, rank for me Aeropostale, Abercrombie and Fitch, American Eagle, and Hollister.
In terms of what I had or what I liked at the time.
Yes, what you liked at the time.
Hollister number 1.
Number 1 with a gun.
Abercrombie was number 2, although I had no Abercrombie.
Okay, because you had to go to the Southern Park Mall to get it, and you couldn't get it at ours.
It was further away. It was less affordable.
Yeah.
American Eagle was number 3.
Yeah.
And I would say probably Aeropostale was number 4.
Yeah.
Now you would actually probably reverse that order of the clothes that I actually had.
Yeah.
Because you have the Grove City.
The harder to get it was, the more desirable it was.
Exactly, right. So for me, I was the Grove City Outlets post Christmas sale, 50% off Aeropostale.
Yeah.
That was my big deal of like, hey, at least this is
you rolled out with 4 pairs of jeans and 8 polos.
Yeah, it may be a C-tier brand according to the cool kids, but darn it, I was able to get my entire wardrobe for half off and no tax. So,
Pennsylvania.
That's how I did it. No, it's really interesting, I guess, that whole thing with Relient K and Abercrombie, because they just don't seem like an Abercrombie image band. I know there's controversy
American
around it.
Eagle I could see.
Yeah.
But Abercrombie seems like they're like too sexy for Relient K. You know what I mean?
At least Hollister, they kind of did this skater thing, surfer thing.
SoCal,
Exactly. Where they're not from SoCal, but they were part of that maybe pop punk sound.
Matt Thiessen with his luscious curly blonde hair and blue eyes looks like a surfer.
Yeah.
A surfer from Canton, Ohio.
He does, and really their sound too, I feel like was part of this SoCal pop punk thing.
Yeah.
And in the way I view Relient K in the lens of pop punk, I mean, it was like an arms race, It started with Relient K, or started with Blink-182, really, in my opinion, of this pop punk thing in like the late 90s with Cheshire Cat was the name of their album. And so they basically started as a...
Let me throw out what about Green Day?
Definitely part of it too, right? But it's that same idea, right? Where it's like you're a 3-piece, and then it's like, oh well, there's some bands that are now a 4-piece, like some 41. It's like, okay, we added another guitar, that's our angle.
Yeah.
And then you have bands like Yellow Card who are like, oh well, I'm going to do 2 guitars and a violin,
an electric violin,
to
which,
mark that
by the
as
way,
well.
Bring back the electric violin. We need some more of that.
You know what? They actually kicked out that electric violin player after a couple albums.
And after that, no one cared about Yellow Card.
I know. But I feel like Relient K fits into that mental map I have of like the SoCal sound of punk scene, because they do sound a little bit like Blink-182 and some of those bands, but then they added a piano, and it's like, wow, we're gonna add like the Beach Boys or like Coldplay. I think that kind of thing to a pop punk sound. It was like really different, and it really, I think, changed a little bit about how accessible pop punk was, right? It was something that like you didn't have to be a surfer dude to listen to anymore. Yeah. It was more mallcore, where you can listen to this on your way with your dad to buy a Baha Men CD, for example,
Until you learn how to manage your money better.
Exactly, right. No, the other controversy other than Abercrombie was, and I'm not trying to comment on things that I have no business in, but as I recall, I'm trying to find more documentation.
Are you talking about the Matt Thiessen
divorce drama?
Yep.
Yeah. I can't really comment on one way or the other, but there was
this is like I said, this is kind of after we stopped maybe being as interested in them when they were kind of trying to be more mainstream at that point. And so I didn't learn about this until many years afterwards.
Same. Yeah. It was just one of those like personal life thing that
you can read about it on Wikipedia if you want.
Yeah, there was like, I think his fiance or ex-fiance went on some radio host and was like, said some things, and I don't know if those turned out to be true or not, so I'm trying not to speculate here. But he is married now.
Yeah.
He
Not
got
to
married,
Katy Perry.
Not to Katy
In
Perry.
another alternate universe, though, they're married. Power couple.
Of course.
Yeah.
But just going as where are they now? He did get married, Matt Thiessen, the lead singer, who to me is kind of the whole band.
Yeah.
He got married in 2015 in New York, and Matt Hoops was his best man. You know, Hoops, I Did It Again, one of the two constant members here.
Yeah.
So pretty cool. Glad to see
the
that
Lennon and McCartney of Relient K, if you will.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm glad they're doing well. You know, a lot of things change, and I can only imagine what it's like as a 21-year-old to have a band that gets so popular and be playing all these festivals and
While you're
Warped
trying to
Tour,
go to Malone College.
While you're trying to go to Malone College, which Malone College is a very small college in a city that doesn't have a lot going on. Just saying. Other than the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I've been there before. I can confirm this.
Yeah. It's nothing bad, nothing against them.
Yeah.
We went to a rival, obviously,
Yeah.
but we didn't see them as our rivals, I would say.
No.
Just saying. Very good. So that's Relient K. And the Relient K, I like to, every time I think about something nostalgically, I like to think about where I'm at, what I did, and what my thought process was as I was listening to these things. Mm-hmm. And we touched on that a little bit earlier in the episode when I talked about how this was like fast and loud and energetic. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about maybe some of my favorite songs by them, and maybe talk about an experience that I had with one of those favorite songs.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go through, and I think we're gonna give our favorite song from each of the first 4 albums, the albums that we're most familiar with. So this is going to be self-titled album, which is Relient K.
Yeah.
Then it's what's the second one called?
Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek.
Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek. Then it's 2 Lefts Don't Make a Right, but 3 Do.
Yep.
And then
Yes.
So I think we both collectively agreed that we were going to try and pick different songs, but for the first album, we agreed the best song was Softer to Me, right?
Mm-hmm. Softer to Me, 100%.
Okay, so we're both, that's our pick for the first album.
Yeah, Softer to Me was a song that had a scream in it before, this was released in 2000, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it was one of the first instances I could remember of there being a scream in a song that wasn't a metal song. And I was like, wow, that sounds kind of cool. So it's like that connection to emo too, which I think is really important to consider this in the background of everything that was happening with like Hawthorne Heights. And
potentially unpopular opinion, I'm going to say Ohio is the birthplace of emo.
I really think you can make a case for that.
And I'm not going to expound upon it.
Okay.
Not right now. Later.
We'll let the hate mail roll in later. But I definitely agree Softer to Me is the best song from that. There are a couple other songs on there that I remember liking, like My Girlfriend, Marilyn Manson Ate My Girlfriend. I enjoyed it at the time, but I can't say that I'd actually listen to that song again.
No.
And it Ate My Girlfriend sounds weirder the older I get. And I'll just leave it at that. You know, it maybe isn't sending the message that...
Youth group podcast, bro.
I know. It's just maybe not sending the message that I think they intended to send.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek. That was the one that I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
I think Pressing On is still a 5 out of 5 song.
Okay.
In my
that's
opinion.
going to be your pick?
That's my pick. Yeah.
Sadie Hawkins' Dance is going to be my pick then. I think those are the 2 best songs. Those are the most memorable songs.
Yeah. You know what? It's a 1-2 punch that really can't be beat.
Yeah.
And so I'll share a little bit about Sadie Hawkins' Dance. You know, that was like, speaking in relation to Relient K and how they fit in with emo, that was like the song for crushing on a girl.
Yeah.
You know, it was a song where they really captured that feeling of, wow, I'm a weird guy and I just want the girls to like me.
Especially if you had a sweater and weren't a jock.
Yes, right. They were made for you. So it was like a love song. I don't know really what it had to do with Christianity or anything, but it was a vaguely wholesome song.
What did Lion-O have to do with...
Very, very, very good point. But arguably one of their most popular songs.
Yeah.
One of my best friends growing up, there's this girl I kind of liked or had a crush on or whatever.
Name drop them both. You don't have to.
Okay. Drew was my friend.
Yeah.
And the girl I had a crush on, her name was Stephanie.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, dude, girls just love if you serenade them. He's like, what you should do to get her to notice you, since you know, we didn't talk to girls, right? We just stared from across the room. Anyone who's been in a middle school, everyone in middle school knows like how this goes. And he's like, dude, you should sing her a song. Like, you should, I don't
Once
know,
again,
serenade
this
her.
is Drew being a weasel.
Yes, of
something
course.
that he would never do, but he's trying to convince you to do it to see
Right.
how it goes,
Uh-huh.
so that he could do it later if
Right.
it went
If it
well.
If it didn't, it was just
then it was
just me acting like
he's
a
beta.
weirdo.
He's just using you as a beta test.
Yes, I literally was
The
a
human
beta
beta
test.
test.
Yeah. So, it was in youth group, and as we mentioned, our format of the youth group was standing around waiting for stuff to happen.
I believe this was before I was in youth group.
It probably was. And I came up to this girl, Stephanie, and I was just like completely like unprovoked. Just
Did you
walked up to
greet her at all? Did you say, hey, Steph?
No. If I'm being 100% honest, no. I was just like,
Did you make it clear that what was about to happen was intended for her, or just did she just think it was an impromptu performance to anyone?
it was kind of impromptu. I didn't think about it, and it pictured it in my head going a lot differently. Maybe I watched Extreme Days too many times, so I didn't know what to expect. Maybe this is too much Fireproof or Extreme Days or something.
It's pre-Fireproof, I think.
I walked up to her and I was like, "Baby, do you like my sweater? Oh, oh, oh!" And
bold of you to start just like right there. That's
well, sure. It was the most call and response type of thing, and I thought like she would like laugh and be like, "Haha, you're so funny. We should go to the dance though, for real."
Yeah.
And it was just awkward, and I just remember that.
Was she aware of the song?
I think so, because she was in youth group, and like you would have heard it.
It was currently playing.
I just assumed that she knew it, like I did,
Yeah.
and that maybe she could think of me when she heard the song from now on. And she probably did, but thought of like, wow, I hate this song now.
She probably does to this day.
Yeah, probably. So it's definitely not my finest moments trying to interact with women appropriately, I suppose, but it happened.
I would argue
I'm
that
not proud
was
of it.
a more appropriate way to interact with women than a song on their next album.
Sure. Then the mood rings.
mood rings.
Yes. Then say all women are moody and emotional.
And we should put mood rings on them
Yes.
to keep track of them.
Yeah, that hasn't really aged well. I think.
Probably not being performed at their live shows any longer.
Probably not. I just. It's weird that like something gets the designation as like youth group safe, and then no matter what they do or say, it's like, oh well, they're a Christian band. I don't know if that was like your experience, but like after
once you've been approved, you can do no wrong.
Exactly, and so they didn't care
Doesn't
about
matter.
they didn't care about the style or how weird it was or like I don't know what the message actually was maybe because like it was a Christian band, so it didn't matter. They just said things, and that's what they do.
So let's move to that album now.
Yeah.
So this is Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but Three Do.
Yes.
And what's your favorite song from this one?
I think Two Lefts Don't Make a Right. I really think I liked College Kids. That's probably the song that I listened to the most.
Yeah, definitely. To prepare for college.
Of course, which is like, again...
That's how you got your score on your ACT, right? You just listened to that and it
just
propelled you.
over and over again.
Propelled you forward.
Yeah. No, it was weird because, again, it's like, what does like a middle schooler think of college? It's like, wow, that sounds so far away.
Yeah.
And now me in my 30s listening to a song about college kids, it's like, wow, they had this really nostalgic, rosy view of college, and it was not really like that,
Yeah, the classic... So at our college, you'd go to like a chapel when you first started, and the chaplain would say like... there's two things. Look to your left, look to your right. Your future mate may be in sight. And then the other one he would say is, absence makes the heart grow fonder, usually of someone else. And then, that plays out perfectly in that song. Was it I called and found out she had 3 boyfriends last semester?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. It prepared me for heartbreak that I thankfully didn't have to go through, but...
Yeah. My favorite song from that album is In Love with the 80s, in parentheses, Pink Tux to the Prom. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say
I have no memory of the 80s.
It's still, neither do I. Wasn't alive yet.
Yep.
Wasn't alive until shortly after, but it was a fun song. The 80s sound cool.
Yep. It was a song that basically was, I'm glad they wrote it. Yeah. I liked it and appreciated it, and I could pretend that I was totally in with the understanding who Tears for Fears were and things like that, right? Because I have no idea, really, even to this day.
Still don't.
I don't think I've ever listened to a Tears for Fears song.
I know they have one Everyone Wants to Rule the World, I think, is by Tears for Fears.
Okay.
But
I know that one.
Send corrections to our socials we'll give later.
Yeah. No, I know that one. Yeah, it's just funny that, I don't know, it was a band they name dropped, and I felt like, wow, I know who they are.
When you went to prom in high school, did you ever, just search around to see if you could find a pink tux? Just to look.
I would have... There's two sides of me, I guess, and I hate to say that I matured a little bit, but I got a serious girlfriend at the end of high school who didn't want me to do that.
How serious?
Serious enough that we got married. So, yeah.
Okay.
I valued her opinion a lot.
I didn't, but I wore a white tux with a pink vest and a pink...
That's cool. Actually, you know what?
It did match my date, though.
Her dress was pink for a dance we went to. I think it was homecoming, and I did wear a pink vest. Yeah. I always wanted to do something like totally extra. Yeah. But my friend Drew is more of the extra one. Yeah. So I think if we both would have stayed single, we probably would have showed up in something wild. Yeah. But that's just our sense of humor and what we liked at the time. But since I had a girl who I cared about, I didn't want to embarrass her by showing up to my high school with something 80s or...
Especially after her freshman and sophomore homecoming date and what she had to put up with there.
Uh-huh.
It was me.
That is a true story. 100% true. This podcast goes deep, guys. You don't even know. So, moving on to we talked about Be My Escape. I think that's a great song. I think it still holds up to this day. I also liked I So Hate Consequences, but I don't think I would actually listen to that now so much, just because it's one of those tongue-in-cheek type of things that makes it a little less listenable, I suppose. Be My Escape can stand on its own. They just had a way of writing that was just so matter-of-fact about what they were doing and what they were talking about that, like, it was funny the first couple times you heard it, but if you're making a mix CD for someone, it was like you would really notice certain lines in there that's like, this is not how a normal writer writes.
Mine is going to be a high of 75 because, once again, same chord progression, so it still sounds rad, but it's acoustic. And then my second, I was going back and forth between is Who I Am Hates Who I've Been, which I think was their second single. I remember it had a music video. So yes. But yeah, I liked that one a lot.
That received a nomination for a Dove Award.
Oh, nice.
So
congrats. Retroactively, we're like,
just nominated.
On your Dove nomination.
That was, it was 15 on the Billboard 200. That was its peak.
That's pretty good.
That's
for a Christian band.
For a Christian band, I'd say that's
good for any band.
That's good for any band. I'd be very happy to have that. So let's go through and rate those albums now that we've talked about our favorite songs. Okay. And we're going to rate these on a scale of 1 to 5 mood rings. Yep. 5 being the best, 1 being the most moody. Yeah. So for me, do you know enough about the first album to rate their first album?
I know that I've listened to it before. I know that when I did listen to it, I listened to it in its entirety. I only liked the one song. Yeah. It's the only one that I remember anything about. So, I mean, it's going to be... It had one song I thought was great on it, so I'll give it a 2. It's going to be a 2 for me.
I think for me, just because I went 2, 1, 3, 4 in the order that I purchased them, I got number 2 first. I liked the first one. They had a very similar trajectory to Blink-182, where they had a different drummer for their second album. Yeah. Same thing happened actually with Blink-182. Before Travis Barker, on their first album, they had this other drummer who no one cares about anymore, but then they got Travis Barker. It was the same kind of deal with Relient K. So they had a different drummer on it, so the drums were a little more straightforward, I would say. But I think their songs were less memorable. Like, they were still tongue-in-cheek, but they were a little too goofy to listen well. And so,
I mean, they had one called Charles in Charge, which I think was about the show. And, right.
Again, another reference totally lost on 6th grade.
One called K Car, which I assume is about the
car. Relient K car. Yeah. I would say a 2 mood rings out of 5 is my rating for that. Now, Anatomy of the Tongue-in-Cheek, that's the second one. So that came out in 2001.
Yeah. Notable songs include Pressing On, Sadie Hawkins Dance, Maybe It's Maybelline, I'm Lion-O, May the Horse Be With You, Breakfast at Timpani's.
Yes. I remember all of those being enjoyable and fun. And even their fun songs, I think, were felt like actual songs and not like jokes. Whereas on the first album, the first songs, they're like, okay, this is kind of a joke song. and I'm going to skip past it next time I listen to it. Whereas I listened to the I'm Lying Oh because that hook is really, really good.
Yeah.
I think it was really memorable. So
yeah, definitely.
for me, honestly, Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek gets a 4. Only because Pressing On has so much, it holds up to today.
Yeah.
It was the first album that really drew me in. I think that they were really at their peak they weren't quite at their peak of who they are, but it gave them enough energy to be picked up by people and noticed by people. And because of that, their first album, it was somewhat generic that I liked it, but I didn't love it. That was the first album I loved. So for me, it's a 4-star.
Yeah, I think for me, I guess I think, like I said, there's a lot of songs on it that are fun, and I think there's 2 that are like, you know, like if it had to be on like their like best of or like their essential album or whatever, which is pretty good from one album for all the albums that they have and everything. So I'd probably give it a 4 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like our rankings are.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to, you know. We'll do it after. I'll rank them in order of how I like the CD or whatever. But
sure. Now, 2 Lefts Don't Make a Right.
Yeah.
We talked about Chap Lips, Chapstick, Things Like Chemistry, which was your introduction.
Yeah.
Mood Rings.
Forward Motion. In
I
Love
like
with
that
the
song.
80s. College Kids. Hoops, I Did It Again. Yeah.
Trademark, I actually, that was one of their harder songs. That was reminded me of Softer to me. Just maybe a little more developed. No screams in that one, but I started to like the harder Relient K, and I always thought that they might go a little bit more hardcore because they had that potential, but you know, you have the Silly Shoes and things
and
like
mentioned,
that.
Yeah, you know, we mentioned Jefferson Aeroplane with the secret track at the end of it and everything.
Yeah.
So for me, just because I have a lot of like nostalgia for this one, and I think it's maybe it contains the most songs that I like out of any of them, but I don't think it has their best song. But because it has like the most hits per, you know, hits per track or whatever, this one's going to be a 5 for me.
Okay,
this one is going to be 5 for me.
Wow.
Even though I don't think their best song is, I think Be My Escape's their best song. I think that's been proven by its success and whatever. But I like if I only had to pick one album, because I like a bunch of songs on this album, that's why I'm going to rate it that way.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to give it a 3.5, and only because, you know, I liked a lot of those songs. They were good. Their guitar parts were good. Their drum parts were good. The writing was interesting. But whenever I'd re-listen to it, there are just a lot of songs that I'd skip. I like Mood Rings, but then I just, because of how the voice was written, I suppose, it just made me like want to skip it, because it's like it's not a song you want to show to your friends if they don't get Relient K.
Yeah, I know. So I understand.
I found myself same thing with like In Love with the 80s. I really like that song, but it's not a song that I felt like I could introduce people to.
I agree with this. I agree with what you're saying.
Even Hoops, I Did It Again, right? Like, it's a good song.
Yeah,
but like
it's a joke about the name of one of the guys in the band.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, you know, I messed everything. And then their joke songs, I feel like, were weaker on this one. You know, to me, I have to compare it to, like, I'm Lino, because that to me is, like, a really good semi-jokey song.
Yeah.
The song on this album that's their joke song, other than, you know, the hidden track, was Gibberish, which is Stop Talking Gibberish or Just Stop Talking. And then there's, like, Argwoo, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me kind of like lazy and phoning it in, I guess. For an album that has a lot of joke songs on it, it didn't need another one. And so that's why for me it's a 3.5. I think they overplayed their hand a little bit in the joke card.
That's fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
so notable songs in this, obviously, Be My Escape, High of 75, I So Hate Consequences, Who I Am Hates Who I've Been, This Week The Trend.
that was a good song too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, this one, I think it has their best song. I think Be My Escape's their best song. I mean, other people can argue that. I mean, it's the one I like the best. But a lot of the songs on this, at least for me, are mostly forgettable, or like I'm not going to come back to them. Like I said, I think there's 3, maybe 4 on here that I really like. And so for this one, I would say I'm probably going to give it a 4.
Okay.
Because I think it's got a lot of good stuff on it, but it's also got a lot that's like I don't know, not worth it for me to come back. I'm only going to listen to these 4 tracks on it,
Right.
and they may be like some of the best work that they put out that that I'm aware of. Like I said, I haven't heard any of their later stuff really, but so yeah, for me it's going to be My Escape, High of 75, Who I Am Hates Who I've Been, and This Week the Trend are like the 4 that I'm going to come back to, and the other ones I'm not very interested in.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was the least funny album.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
They definitely started to become more serious with this one. Yeah.
But I will take some points off for the song title, The Only Thing Worse Than Beating a Dead Horse is Betting on One.
Yeah.
Because, listen, we all know that that's a Fall Out Boy thing.
Yeah.
That was the Fall Out Boy thing. This album came out in 2004.
Yeah.
From Under the Cork Tree was already a thing.
Was it? I thought their first album was out, but not their second
From
one.
Under the...
But
you could be right,
also,
actually.
not that their first album didn't have ridiculously long names anyway.
Sure. They definitely
It's
had
been
it
a
on their
Fall Out
early-
Boy thing forever.
You actually are right.
Yeah.
Okay. You are right.
Yeah.
I take it back.
Yeah.
It came out November 2nd, 2004, Relient K, and then From Under the Cork Tree was May 3rd, 2005.
Yeah.
But they were doing the weird title thing.
Yes, in the
on their
album
first
before
album.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyways, it just felt like a little bit of a cheap rip-off and nod, and it's only
Also,
a minute track.
I was going to say, I think that track's really short, isn't it?
It is.
It's like not a real song.
Sure,
just-
it's short, but it feels like they weren't quite sure who they were, which is ironic because their songs on the other ones are so like
I said,
strongly
this
themselves.
is where I think they're trying to break out into the mainstream, and they have some good songs to do that, and then they have like some where they're kind of like they're unsure which way to go. Like, do we stay with the weird kind of stuff that we've been doing? Do we try to appeal to more people that aren't in on the joke or whatever? And
to me, it's a 4 mood rings out of 5.
Yeah.
Only because
Agreed. Yeah.
the songs that are there, for the same reason that you said, are so solid that they make up for the weakness of the rest of the album.
Agreed.
It's still not a 5 out of 5 for me, only because there's it just seems like a lot of filler too. And this was, again, in a different era, and I'm sort of looking at this from the perspective of how would I listen to it now. And it was a lot more common to have filler tracks because you're buying an album. You're not going on YouTube and listening to it streaming.
Yeah.
So
what I want to qualify the 5 that I gave out earlier. It's like a 5 for Relient K, not in comparison to other artists or whatever. Like I said, for me, that album holds a special place. It was the first album I won at a youth group, and I think it has a lot of songs that I would be interested in listening to even today, and so that's why. But I'm not saying it's a perfect album by any means, but I'm saying I think it's a strong album and maybe a very good representation of what Relient K is to me.
Yeah, so, I think that's a good way to describe it. So, closing thoughts on Relient K. For me, Relient K was a band that I'll always be nostalgic for.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I don't listen to them with regular rotation. There's some people who are still the true fans, and I appreciate that. I think that's really cool. But to me, I'll kind of go back on those songs, and those songs still definitely hold up, but it's not on my regular to-do.
I recently went back and put some of their songs onto my Spotify favorites list, so that once in a while, when I hit shuffle, I'll get one in there, which is nice. Like I said, I'm probably not going to go and listen to the whole album or anything, but it's a nice surprise as we're shuffling through.
Yeah, and I think that what they did for the youth group scene as a whole really is more important than the music almost, right? They made it cool to be a little bit nerdy. They made it fun to be goofy. They recognized that they can just be themselves, and this was like a youth group approved band that we could all get into, and it was somewhat trendy in terms of sounding like the era with that emo influence and the style and the band shirts and all that kind of thing. For me, it really kicked that off. And I got, for me, it was the gateway drug, I suppose, into Christian music. Seriously. I knew of Newsboys and Audio Journal before, but I wasn't gateway drugged until I saw that show with Relient K and saw MXPX there, and it was like, then you have, an entire record label with all kinds of bands on Tooth and Nail Records and Goatee Records, and you have all these other bands, and you're like, wow, my music world is totally open now. And so for that reason, I'll still always remember them positively. I think he's an interesting songwriter, Matt Thiessen. His voice is definitely
good enough for Katy Perry.
Good enough for Katy Katy Perry, true,
Yeah.
but definitely unique in his voice and
Yeah.
I think his songwriting. And for that, they stayed in their own lane, which is
Yeah.
way more than I could say for a lot of Christian bands that followed, who are trying to be the Christian version of another band.
Yeah.
It didn't strike me that they were trying to be the Christian version of Blink-182. They just were, and they kind of were in the same genre.
No,
Whereas,
that
like,
makes,
there's a lot of one-to-one copies, I think, that you can point to of like, oh yes, we were just the Christian version of the band that you're not allowed to listen to, you know. So that's my closing thoughts. Do you have any closing thoughts about Relient K?
No, I'll just say, I don't know. They were pretty influential to me. They kind of like I said, it was kind of like the gateway to Christian music for me, and their music is still slaps. That's what the kids say,
slaps,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
If I see him around, sorry, I don't mean that this was negative or anything, so don't kill me.
Yeah.
But if you do have comments about this episode or people that you want us to talk to in the future, we'll try to set it up. I've got some connections. I don't have great connections, but I do have an internet connection.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can talk to some of these people.
Hit us with those socials.
Let's go for the socials. If you want to follow some more of what we're doing, you can follow us on Twitter at YG Reunion Tour, or Instagram at Youth Group Reunion Tour. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, smart remarks, you want to roast us, feel free to drop that to youthgroupreuniontour@gmail.com.
All right. Catch you later.
See you on the flip side.